All right, we are now live. Welcome to Winterviews, Series 3, Episode 2. I am your host, Catherine Silva, Cat for short, and tonight I am joined by the incredible Red Lagoe. Hello, Red.
Hello. I'm so happy to be here. So happy to talk about very sad things.
Yeah. There's definitely something like I feel a little devious being all like excited to talk about grief horror, but
Yeah, that's the way it
something
is.
about it. Yeah. I was going to also mention to our viewers tonight that Red has a secondary live event happening after this one. Would you mind telling our viewers what that's about and where they can find that?
Sure. So I'm going to be on an event at 9 p.m. It is with the Dark Bites podcast with Rick Hipson, and he's got posts on Twitter and I think on Instagram and Facebook. So if you go to the Dark Bites website, the posts they'll be there. He has a YouTube channel as well, and so it's going to be me and Ronald Kelly and Laurel Hightower, because we all wrote a novella that will be part of one book called The Devil's Backbone, which is Appalachian horror.
It sounds pretty sweet.
Yeah, it comes out tomorrow.
Collection of fantastic writers all together. So if everybody is not doing something after this, you should definitely pop over there and check it out. I will post a link towards the end of our chat so that you can just make that seamless transition over there. So our topic tonight, I'm going to read from my script because I'm terrible at remembering. Our topic tonight is one of my personal favorite subgenres in horror, and that is grief horror. We had a number of guests this season want to do grief horror as the subject, which is pretty funny. And I think that means that it's becoming more and more popular, which makes me very excited for the growth of the genre. I don't know about you, but I've read 3 upcoming grief horror books this year. One of them was yours, which is called In Excess of Dark, and we will be discussing that with no spoilers on the show tonight. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the classification of grief horror, it is a story surrounding an individual or individuals who are experiencing loss or grief while being subjected to horror-related events. Grief horror often contains a psychological undertone, though it may cross over into ghost stories, supernatural horror, slashers, erotic horror, and more. So my first question today is about the subject of what is it about the subject of grief horror that drew you to want to write it for this book?
Well, for this book, I didn't even know I was going to be writing grief horror. I set out to write in this story as it was a little more surface level horror, kind of just like a fun slashery kind of thing. But in the beginning, the protagonist lost people, and as I got to a certain point in the storytelling, I realized the book I wasn't feeling it. It was, like I said, it was very surface level. I didn't like where it was going. And it wasn't until I leaned into that main character's grief, into what she really experienced and the actions and reactions she would have, that the story took a turn and it became grief horror. So I didn't even realize it was going to be grief horror until I was about halfway through.
Okay.
But I really like leaning into broken characters. I like digging into that pain and stirring the knife just to see what will happen. Not in a sadistic kind of way, but in in a more empathetic way. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it does. It does.
What is it about grief horror? I don't even know. Because grief is a monster in and of itself. And
Mm-hmm.
and it's something like nobody ever wants to experience. So you think of other subgenres of horror. Like I love zombie apocalypse horror. Love
Mm-hmm.
it. But I like to imagine, what would happen if I was in the zombie apocalypse? How ready would I be? I like adventure horror and survival horror. And I like the creeping dread of, ghost stories because I like that fear that comes with it.
Mm-hmm.
But grief, grief is excruciating. Grief is something
Yeah.
like nobody wants to go through. So I don't know why I'm so drawn to it, to be honest. And again, it's nothing evil or sadistic. I think it's more of just, I like leaning into the compassion of it.
Yeah.
Um, and just putting myself into the character's shoes and going to those dark places that most people don't ever get to talk about.
Yeah. I would say similar. When you are conceptualizing stories, is it usually like a character that you come up with first when you're creating, or is it a concept?
It's almost never a character first.
Okay. All right.
It's usually a concept.
Okay.
Yeah, because my ideas come as tiny little concepts, just a little nugget of an idea, and so it's not usually a person. It just starts as this thing,
Mhm.
and then I have to find the right person to experience the thing.
Got it. Okay.
I have to play matchmaker with my concept and a character.
That's cool though. As somebody who is really bad at coming up with a concept for stories, I just think that it's so interesting, and just so much more fun. It seems like so much more fun to have the idea, the kernel of the story, and then get to sort of like go on a hunt for who your perfect protagonist is going to be. Um,
That's funny
so
because I think I would love to be able to just come up with a character first, but I don't know what to do with the character. Like I don't know if just my brain doesn't function this way or what, but I've tried before to just come up with a character and I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know why any of these things matter about the character. I
mhm.
guess that's where I should try to get creative, but it just doesn't work that way. It's usually an idea first.
Yeah. Well, everybody's different. I know for me, it's that character ends up having a voice right away, and it's a little weird. It seems a little like multiple personality, to just have somebody talking in your head, but it is like it's just suddenly there, um, and then whatever happens happens. But in your book, had you had already established that this character was going to lose
Her people. Yeah.
loved ones. Not going to
Yeah.
say loved ones, and um, so you were already through that before you decided that you were going to lean into the grief side of things.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, had you had the idea that it was going to be um, more, I guess, supernatural in theme? at that time too?
Yes. Yeah. So I had gone hiking in the Blue Ridge Mountains just before I wrote this book. And I was just, I was inspired. We stayed at a pretty primitive-ish campsite. Like there are no showers. There are bathrooms, but there are no showers. There are no hookups, nothing. Just a tent camping situation. There are bear boxes, so it was in the woods. And I just had a lot of visuals. I've been camping before, but my mind always goes to crazy places. And I had all these insane visuals of things that could happen, supernatural things too. And I jotted them all down because they were going to be inspiration for whatever I was going to write next.
Nice.
Yeah, and so while I was there, I knew I wanted to write something that was at least partially set in the mountains. I absolutely love the mountains. So that's what I knew going into it. I forgot what the question was.
I asked did you know that it was going to be supernatural when you?
Oh, yes. Yeah. So that's a very long question. I mean, a very long answer. It could have just been a yes, I knew.
Do you get to go out camping and hiking often?
No, I wish I could go more. Yeah, I wish I could go more. Not even once a year. We actually go out to the mountains and camp. Around here, I'll hike around here. It's very flat because I live near the coast. So we have some parks, and I hike in the parks, if you can call it hiking. It's more like a walk.
You get out and enjoy nature at least.
Yeah, I need nature. I need it. We live in a city. In this area of the city, it's more like we're in the city, but it's more like a suburb kind of situation. But it's too much pavement, it's too many buildings, not enough stars. I gotta get away from pavement and see trees on a regular basis, or I'll go insane.
Yeah, no, I get that. It's I mean, there's not really any city here, but it is working constantly. It's a good way to just let off some steam and go out into the woods and spend some time out in the fresh air. Which it leads me to a question that I didn't actually have written down. And that is sort of the catharsis of wilderness in grief horror, like the idea that going out into the woods is something to sort of give your character space to think. And there are moments in your book where there is a lot of reflective time spent in the wilderness. So I just wanted to touch upon that a little bit and sort of ask what you were, how you came up with those ideas.
That is probably a lot of me in there. The whole the quote, "The mountains are calling and I must go." That is me all the time. I live on the coast. I always want to be in the mountains. I grew up in a small town 3 hours from the mountains, and I would, when I was 18, I would just pick up and go. I wouldn't tell anybody. I'd just get in my car and drive 3 or 4 hours north to the Adirondacks and go hiking and never tell anybody. And it probably wasn't the smartest thing to do, but I did it. And I just loved it. I loved being out there and I liked being alone. But it is scary being alone in the woods, even at a park, even on a hiking trail that's fairly well traveled. If you go early enough in the morning or late enough in the afternoon, it's pretty quiet, even the popular trails. So there's time to think, there's time to reflect, there's time for characters to conjure up all the awful ideas that they're gonna carry out.
I had a question relating to that actually. and that is in excess of dark. Imagination and grief and darkness are tied very closely together. What was the idea behind making a person's imagination their enemy of sorts, especially with grief driving their imagination?
With the imagination, that was a back burner plot that I had for a while. When I was growing up, I would imagine a lot of things. You know, all kids imagine things and they play make-believe. Mine were more like storytelling imagining, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Where I'd play the same scenario in my head over and over, and I'd tweak it, I'd edit basically as I went along. I'd play the same thing the next day, but I'd change it a little bit to make the story for myself a little better. And so I didn't realize I was storytelling at the time, but that's what I did. And then sometimes I would just imagine or dream weird things, and then they'd kind of happen. Not in a supernatural way, just kind of like deja vu kind of things.
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
And my mom would always say, then after I started telling my mom about this, she'd start to say, I'd tell her about a weird dream. And she goes, whoa, well, don't go anywhere. I'm like, it's not going to happen, Mom. And so she started to worry that anything that I dreamt or anything that I thought about too much would come true. And so that was always a really cool idea that has just been simmering for the past 30 years. And so I'm really glad that I got to bring it to life with this story.
Yeah.
As for combining it with grief, it just made sense. Because sometimes also as I just have these awful thoughts and worries. You know, everybody worries about losing a loved one. Everybody in their life at some point, if they haven't yet, is going to experience grief. And it's just such a horrible thing. And so I think about things like if my kid is late from school, usually it's like, oh, the bus is running late. But then as minutes go by, I'm like, oh, I start asking what if? And it's those what if questions that lead to horrible things. And then I have daydreams and about, and they're not forced daydreams. They're just like my brain goes on autopilot and plays a scene in front of my head, and they're awful, awful things. And it's really scary when stuff like that happens. And so I took it and I wrote it. I wrote about it from the perspective of someone where it actually happened.
Well, it's a really, I think it's a really easy concept for readers to identify with. I certainly identified with it when I read the book. I daydream about a lot of ridiculous stuff happening. That
we don't talk about it.
Yeah, that's just where your mind goes. And it's, I don't think there's any sense in it. It's just like that's just what happens.
Yeah. Well, we live in a world that these things happen, terrible accidents happen, gun violence and wars and all sorts of awful things happen in the world. So it's not that far of a stretch to worry that our loved ones are in that situation. So I don't know. I know, but you say this to anybody if you have a daydream and you worry about it. You say it to someone, they're like, "Oh, you're crazy." They're fine. So it's this kind of taboo thing that we're not supposed to talk about these awful, horrible.
Yeah, it's almost like jinxing it if you say it out loud or something.
Yep.
I will share that one of the craziest things that I daydreamed about, and it actually did happen, was I moved to this house, which has a very annoying, it's on a very annoying curve in the road. And I had a daydream where I thought about a car going around that curve too fast, crashing, and then somebody like stumbling up my front lawn to my door. And that was one of those just like, that's really silly that's not going to happen. And then it happened. And it was, 10 o'clock at night. I was texting with my boyfriend, and a car hit the telephone pole, took out the power, crashed. Teenager just was not paying attention. I guess there was a deer in the road, something like that. And next thing I knew, stumbling up my front lawn towards my front door, and I was like, "Oh my God. Oh my God."
Wow.
Yeah. So it's spooky.
Uh-huh.
You don't want to think that something like that can happen, and then it does.
Yeah,
So.
and that's the thing. Like it seems unreasonable, and it's definitely spooky that you've thought about it and it happened. But it also seems very I don't want to say sensible, but it seems realistic. Like you live on a curve where cars could easily go out of control. So it kind of makes sense that it happened, but it is strange.
Fear based in, realistic circumstances, then it makes more sense, certainly. But I wanted to go back to the idea of readers understanding that concept for your book. What do you think speaks to readers about grief horror? Because we're seeing it everywhere now. Everybody is definitely tapping into their inner sadness and writing grief horror. Why is it such I called it a transcendent topic, but it's a topic that keeps coming back and back and back. So why do you think that it's so important, I guess?
I think because grief it's just universal. It's just like, I think I just said it a little while ago. Everybody is going to go through with it at some point. Everybody fears grief. They tell us when we first start writing horror, what did we learn? We learn to write what you're afraid of. And so once you get past the spiders and the heights or all those superficial fears, people are afraid of death. People are afraid of the unknown. People are afraid of losing their loved ones. And anybody can connect with the fear of losing someone they loved. And so I think it's just so universal that it connects with a lot more people than other subgenres.
Yep, I agree. It's impossible to avoid unless you are a hermit and have been since you were a baby.
Yeah, or a psychopath.
Or a psychopath. Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
My other question was, this isn't your first time delving into a grief horror subject. I remember I read one of your short story collections, and there was, I think it was a beginning story and the ending story were very grief involved. And so I just wanted to ask, what other works of yours have kind of fit this subgenre?
Yeah, so that, I think you're talking about probably Lucid Screams, which was my first short story collection. And the opening and closing stories bookend each other, and it's about the same family. And it's about a mother who's a drug addict who is kind of trapped in this experience of losing her children because of her poor choices. And the ending speaks from the father's point of view of missing his children. And I think, gosh, there was Dogwood. Dogwood was a recent one that was in Cemetery Gates, Seasons of Severance, and also in my most recent collection. And that's a father looking for his missing child. So yeah, I do tend to lean into grief. I didn't realize that I was doing it for the first couple collections, but once I got to my third collection, I'm like, I'm seeing a theme here. It's just that's my fear. It's losing my children. That's my biggest fear. Losing my people. And so exploring those fears and exploring the possibilities through another character is kind of the way I go for a lot of my stories.
Yeah, I think there's definitely something in like repeat visiting of similar themes. Just it's something that we go to because it's not exactly a comfort, but it is it's a way to deal with the fear. And it's and it's an ever persistent one, so it's just going back to it and revisiting it in different ways, and writing from it from different perspectives. So I totally understand.
There's 1,000 different ways to write grief horror because everybody grieves differently. Yeah. Everybody has a different backstory, and different people they can grieve over, and different ways that they handle their grief, whether it be good or bad. So there's just endless stories to be told.
And your most recent collection was Impulses of a Necrotic Heart. And that came out last year, right?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
September.
And where can people find that one?
Pretty much wherever books are sold online. Go ahead and ask your local library or local bookstore to stock it. They should be able to get it easily because they can get it through Ingram. So just ask them to order it if you want to go local.
And the new book, In Excess of Dark, is still forthcoming from Darklit Press. And that one comes out when?
March 15th.
Okay, right around the corner. So
it is. So excited. I'm so nervous. It's been making a good impression, it seems, on most people. It's getting quite a few reviews because it got put on NetGalley. So hopefully people will continue to like it. I'm sure it's going to get into the hands of some people who aren't digging what I wrote, which is what I feared when I wrote it. When I wrote that book, especially as I got toward the end, I thought, I don't think people are going to like this. Like, I don't think anybody, not anybody, but I think I worried that a lot of people would have a problem with it because of the direction that it went. And I just didn't care because it just felt right for the story.
Yeah.
It felt wrong to end it in any other way. And so that's what I did. I wrote it. And I laughed maniacally. cried a little.
I mean, that's the fear, is people not understanding why you chose to do something. But for a lot of people who are not writers, it's hard to explain the idea that like the characters, this is what makes sense for them. This is how this needs to end for them. And whether you get that or not is like, hey, I wrote the book. This is like, I understand it.
Yeah, I'm okay with I'm totally okay if people don't get it and they don't like it. That's fine. But I'm just waiting. I'm waiting for those reviews to come in, the bad ones. So we'll see.
I thought, what was it? I was browsing YouTube this afternoon and I saw there was a video somebody had done they did a review of your book. Was it Mindy's book life, something like that? But I saw the cover and I was like, oh, hey, there's an excess of dark. Awesome. So it's definitely making the rounds. It's getting out there. See a new review for it almost every day, which is awesome.
Yeah, it was getting about a review a day for a while. It's slowing down a little bit, but that's okay. It's not even out yet.
Yeah,
so it's cool. Yeah. Yeah, Darklit Press has been great. He sent it to a lot of reviewers ahead of time.
That's
so
awesome.
That helped a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, casting a wide net. And it seems like Darklit Press definitely has a really good selection of reviewers. They've got a lot of subscribers. So it seems like it's going to make a big splash.
I hope so. If not, that's all right. I got another one coming too.
Now, so that leads me to my next question, which is, do any of your upcoming or current works in progress contain any elements of grief horror?
Not really. No, I don't. No. So the book that comes out tomorrow, the novella that I have in the Dark Tide book, it's not really grief horror. There's a brother who misses his brother who's in Vietnam, but yeah, it's not grief horror. It's Appalachian. It's supernatural. It's a little psychological and mind bendy. And then my novel, Bloodstains by Gaslight, is a story. I don't even know what to call it. It's a vampire story, but I don't like to open with it's a vampire story because it's a story about teen relationship abuse and violence told through a vampire lens. So, but yeah, it's not grief. So no, I don't have any grief horror coming out. I think I broke my heart a little too much last year, so I need to
everybody's got to take a break. It's a heavy subject, so that is totally understandable. And it sounds like the stuff that's coming up is going to be pretty awesome as well. Definitely compelling subjects to study. What would you say are maybe some of your favorite book titles or television shows or movies with depictions of grief and horror?
Well, I scroll. Well, one of the very first books that I read that was labeled grief horror, that I knew that it was labeled grief horror, was Laurel Hightower's Crossroads. And I kept hearing people call it grief horror, but I didn't even know grief horror was a subgenre until I read that book. So that was my first. Grief horror that I absolutely loved. And talking about movies, Descent, which opens with a strong grief catalyst that sends our protagonist on her adventure to the caves. The Devil Takes You Home by Gabino Iglesias. Every action that man takes is just driven by the grief over his loss, and it was absolutely fabulous. To Be Devoured. To Be Devoured by Sarah Tatlinger. I love that. It's one of my favorite books of all time. I love it, but the main character has this history of grief, and it has caused mental health issues throughout her life, and all those mental health issues are coming to a climax during this book, and it's excellent. It's expertly executed. What about you? I could list like 10 more. But
No, I mean, that's I'm happy to listen to you list more. the only one of those horrifically that I have read is Crossroads. I have a signed copy of The Devil Takes You Home downstairs, which I have not read yet, and I'm ashamed that I haven't.
Don't be
read
ashamed.
yet.
Our TBRs are. I have signed books I haven't read yet either.
God, so many books.
My thought is we're going to have all these books, and when the zombie apocalypse does happen, we're going to have plenty of reading material because we're just going to be cooped up and not doing anything.
Make forts out of them.
Yeah. What's sad is we're going to have to burn them for warmth.
Oh, God. Jeez. That's incredibly
That's
depressing.
a grief horror story.
Yeah. God. So no, I think one of my absolute favorite pieces of grief horror is Come With Me by Ronald Malfi.
I'm reading it right now and I love it.
Like, God, that book, that has stuck with me for a couple years now. I think it just
I think I'm really, a little over a third of the way through it. I think I'm about a third of the way through it right now. It's so good.
It's compelling. It really pulls you in. So I really enjoyed that. I am currently reading Let the Woods Keep Our Bodies by Ellie or E.M. Roy, who's a fellow Maine author. There's a strong grief horror component in that book, and it's really good. I'm just about halfway through it right now, and I'm really enjoying it. And then I will also mention, just because I said that I had read a bunch of grief horror books already that are coming out this year, I read The World He Once Knew by Micah Castle and As Good as She Gets by Beckett, Cooper Beckett. And those both have grief horror in them as well. So I feel like I should mention them also because Micah is our guest next week. So.
Oh, great.
Yeah. But did you have, you said you had a scroll of.
Oh, God. Disappearance at Devil's Rock by Paul Tremblay. I don't know if you've read that. Oh, I love that one. Now. That's you're dealing with this mother's grief who's lost her son. He's missing, and this isn't. I mean, I'm saying what happens in like the first chapter of the book. He's missing, but she's seeing like his ghost, kind of. So, so the reader kind of thinks he's probably gone, and so, but like we're just experiencing the mother. Trying to find out what happened to her son. So that one was really good. I read recently Bury the Child by Elsie Marino. It was a little novella. That was good. That was a quick and punchy little creepy ghost kind of story with a really impactful ending. That one was really good.
That is next up. Elsie is also a guest this season, so nice. I will be reading. Another person who wanted to do grief horror as the subject. So, but
tell him I stole it.
That one next. Yeah. Yes, I will.
I'll tell him I stole
it.
I'll rub it in his face.
Yeah.
What's another one? Well, movies, Hereditary. Oh my Lord.
Yeah. I haven't seen Hereditary. I know I've seen clips from Hereditary. I know enough of what happens that I'm just like, I'm afraid of it.
I don't know if I want to watch it again. It was that devastating. It was, I want to watch it again because I want to see maybe the little things that I missed leading up to the reveal at the end, but it was such a it just wrecked me. I was
Mhm.
sobbing along with what's her name? Tony Collette.
Yeah, Tony Collette. Yeah.
Sobbing along with her. It was really, really, really well done. I wasn't a huge fan of the ending, but but like
Mm,
overall, the story was fantastic. And then of course there's Pet Cemetery,
yeah.
classic grief horror.
Yeah.
Our Own Unique Affliction by Scott J. Moses. It's a
Oh,
vampire
yeah.
novella.
Yep.
Yeah, this is a vampire kind of experiencing her own grief. So that was a good one too.
Yeah, that one's also on my list. Um, the Netflix adaptation of The Haunting of Hill House was very grief focused, and I adored it.
Yeah, yeah. That I loved that show when it came out because we were watching it and there's a scene, there were multiple scenes where I thought they were gonna, they're building the tension whenever in
Mhm.
these movies, at least recently, when they start building that tension, there's always some kind of jump scare, which I think is kind of
Mhm.
a cheap tactic. And so I was just waiting for the jump scare, but they didn't. They did a very slow reveal of the terrors
Yeah,
almost every time, and it was perfectly executed. I love that show.
yeah. Yeah, Mike Flanagan and Jamie,
Mhm.
definitely Jamie as well. They definitely have a strong uh, ability to really spread out that dread and pace that terror.
Mhm.
Um, and a number of other shows of theirs utilized grief as well. Like I would definitely count the newest iteration, the Fall of the House of Usher, because it's, well, characters dying left and right.
Yeah.
Um,
I haven't finished watching it. I've only watched the first 3 or 4. I still have to finish it. But yeah, I was about to say the same thing about that show.
and then Midnight Club also, which
I haven't seen that.
it's an adaptation of, I think it's Christopher Pike, a bunch of his books. I might be getting the totally wrong author right now, but they're like teenage, young adult uh, books from the 90s. So it's
Oh,
a
yeah, yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Yep.
But that was a great series, which we sadly will not get a season 2 of. Thank
Hmm.
you, Netflix.
That was one I never read. I feel like I was just a hair too old for Goosebumps
Hmm.
and those when they finally became popular. Not necessarily when they came out, but when they became popular enough to like end up in libraries that I was at. I was already well into my late teens when I learned Goosebumps was a thing.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. I was probably. I mean, it was my brother was like the right age, and he's a couple of years older than me, and then I kind of got into it a little bit late. But yeah, no, there's definitely something to be said uh, for all of those. Um, we're closing in here. I don't want to. I wanted to give you time to get to your next thing, so
Okay.
I don't want to like have us be up on that in the last 5 minutes or whatever. So I am going to go to my question, which is a new series of questions I'm doing for this series, which is an aside question. So it's something related to you, related to writing, not necessarily related to grief horror. And it is about your art. Um, you're an artist as well as a writer. And art does have a special meaning in this book, In Excess of Dark.
Mm-hmm.
So I want you to tell us how art connects with your writing process, and what it means to you anyway, I guess.
I've always been a very visual person. I'm a visual learner. Even when I write, I don't think of the words first.
Mhm.
It's ridiculous. I see images and
Yep.
I feel emotion, and and it's kind of this abstract cloud. Sometimes there'll be little like phrases
Hmm.
that are in there, and so there's this abstract cloud of ideas and scenes, images and emotions, and then I have to kind of line them up and figure out the words that go with it. So writing is hard for me in that way, but with art, all I have to do is think about the images and the emotion, and it's a lot easier. It's a lot
Hmm.
easier for me, but it's easy for me to picture art that goes with stories because I always imagine what everything looks like. So I think that's why I'm drawn to illustrating my short stories,
Hmm.
because I just feel like they need pictures. Because I'm a 10-year-old who needs pictures of my stories.
Do you, before you, or when you're working on something, will you do art for it to help sort of get through some writing challenges, or is that
No, not usually. But I do doodle a lot while I'm plotting.
okay?
So if I plot out my ideas, there's always little sketches and doodles, and sometimes they're
Hmm.
related to what I'm drawing or what I'm working on, and sometimes they're just random doodles that make no sense. But yeah, there's always some kind of visual aspect outside of the words going on when I'm plotting.
Hmm. Um, I know what you mean. Like I'm a very visual writer also, but I do not have the artistic talent. Uh, so it's like it is so hard to try and translate those images into words sometimes.
Do you ever do mood
Um,
boards? A lot of people do like the mood boards with images they find.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I'll do mood boards, and even then I will just be like, yeah, that's everything that I like. Now I need to like try and translate it into word form.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I struggle with the word form part, which is ridiculous because I love writing. Um,
Yeah.
but I love storytelling. I just always have. I've always loved making up stories. I've done it since I was a kid, but I didn't realize I liked writing until I was well into adulthood. And yeah, it's always been that way. I like the stories, and I struggle to write them. I struggle to come up
Mhm.
with the words, but I do it because I got to tell the story.
Yeah. Yep. The compulsion,
Hmm.
the desire.
Yep.
Yeah. Gotta get it out.
Yeah.
Totally understand.
Bad things happen if you don't get those stories out.
um, so well, as we're wrapping up, would you I'm gonna pop over and just grab that link for your upcoming um next live event. Would you mind telling people where they can find more information about you, where they can pre-order In Excess of Dark?
You can find more about me at redlagoe.com. And I am also at Red Lagoe across several social media platforms: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I do a little TikTok, but it's kind of sporadic and it's pointless. And I am on Blue Sky and Threads, but I don't really use them that much yet. So that's where I am. And you can pre order In Excess of Dark on pretty much anywhere books are sold online. You can also get it from darklithorror.com or darklitpress.com. I think he's updating his website. So anyway, there's a link to it on my website, redlagoe.com.
Awesome. I am going to post the link right in our right in the event page right now. So anybody who would like to pop over there, you now can.
Is anybody here?
We've got 3 in the audience right now. I haven't seen any comments, but we do have 3 watching.
You're all talking shit about me, aren't you?
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
And what I will be
it's probably
posting
Elsie Marino.
Yeah.
No, sorry.
Yeah. He's grumbling about not getting the grief horror topic. Hopefully I'll post this by this weekend. I'm a little bit behind in posting these episodes, but I should have it up soon. So if anybody missed out on this amazing live interview, you will have a chance to catch it.
Well, thank you for who's watching. I appreciate you coming.
Yes. Thank you to everybody that did show up. You're awesome. We really appreciate it. Thursday nights can be kind of wonky sometimes, but
a lot of people watch later too. A lot of people just watch after the fact. Yeah.
So I will say thank you for coming out this evening and doing this. I know you've got to get to your thing, so but I really do appreciate you coming by and talking grief horror.
Well, I appreciate you having me. Thank you so much. I'll nerd out about any kind of horror every day.
And next week, February 29th, Thursday night, 8:00, we will be discussing weird horror fiction with Micah Castle. So make sure that you viewers tune in for that. And then for now, we will say good night and don't have any scary, realistic dreams about sad things, because bad things might happen. All right.